much, everybody. I'm delighted to share some of my thinking with you. I work as a learning consultant, so learning is my passion. I'm an educational transactional analyst, been immersed in TA for about 14, 15 years, and really learning for me is not only in an institution of learning. I'm thinking of adult learning as learning in all sorts of contexts. So I use different modalities like coaching, supervision, training, facilitation, and I began to wonder what makes people who have a new awareness really change when it's transformational, and what is just what, I forget your name, spoke about, thank you, rearranging the deck chairs. So are we just shifting stuff around, or are we really getting into what change is about to make it lasting? So as an educational person, I of course had to read David Kolb's classic on experiential learning, and then I came across another author, James Zull, The Art of Changing the Brain, and the two together just made a lot of sense to me. So this is what the talk is about, crossing the line. And I'm going to ask you to hold in mind some piece of work you're doing, and then at the end, I don't know if this is allowed, I'd like you to buzz for like a minute or two, of course if I was in my time. So from my TA thinking, this is the sense I make of who we are. Humans are meaning-making beings. Something happens, and as human beings we want to make sense of it. Who am I in this? What do I believe about myself and the world? And we do this initially as a little person growing up. And TA's thinking is that from birth, probably even pre-birth, up till the age of about 7 or 8, we're actually writing our first version of our script. What do we believe life is like? And it's not about what reality is. It's our construction of reality. So I'm a little person, something, my mother goes away, and the sense I make of that is it's my fault. I did something to her, or she doesn't love me anymore, therefore, and we go from the general to the specific, therefore all women can't be trusted. So it's only a construction, and therefore we can constantly deconstruct and reconstruct and make new meaning of who we are and what life is like. So that's the preamble. Kolb is the one author, and James Zull. They're both colleagues at Case Western University. So one is an educationalist, and the other one is a professor of biochemistry. And he said, this mate of mine, his learning cycle, and I'm sure many of you know Kolb's learning cycle, there's something about it that's linking up with my neuro research. And different parts of the cycle happen in different parts of the brain. So I'm going to build up the model. And before I do that, take a moment or so to think about a client or a person with whom you're facilitating change and growth. And this would apply equally if you're a coach, if you're a supervisor, if you're a counselor. So a person coming to mind that you're doing work with, and use that as your checkpoint as we're going through the model. So the first part of Kolb's cycle is the concrete experience. We do something. So if I take my example as a supervisor, I sit with a coach and they tell me about what happened. So there was this client and this and that and the other happened. The next stage is we do reflective observation. We look at it. So what was going on there? What sense am I making of this in terms of my previous experience? This is the kind of looking at all the pieces of the puzzle. Are there themes here? Are there patterns emerging? The next part in the cycle is abstract conceptualization, or we can think about it as thinking about it. And this is where we start to make meaning. What are principles we can extract here? So I think the reflective observation is maybe shuffling the pieces around, but then if we take the next step, we're actually starting to say, well, what new meaning can I make? And that feeds into the last stage, the active experimentation. How can I now change and start doing something different, which then becomes my new experience? So I think you're all familiar with that, that process. Maybe you haven't Yeah, who's heard of Kolb? Knows Kolb. Okay. Now along comes James Zoll, and he speaks about the transformation line, and it's a line, let me play with it, that divides what happens in the concrete experience and reflective observation from the abstract conceptualization and the active experimentation. He's saying there's a very distinct difference that happens, and he links it to different parts of the brain as well. I'm so used to interacting with people when I work that I'm wanting to say, what do you think? Where are you? Is there time for one brief comment? Thought?
Your time.
What?
It's your time.
My time. I can do with it what I want to do. Anyone want to say anything at this point about what's going on for you? All right, let me add in the next piece. So I've taken out the arrows just to make it a cleaner slide. So Zoll is saying the first two parts of the learning cycle, that's where we act as the receiver. So things are coming from the outside to the inside. So we're having an event, there's something happening, we're taking it in the experience, and when we think about it, we're connecting experiences, organizing the information. But in fact, it's still quite passive and in the past, because nothing new has happened yet. We're taking an example and we're just thinking about it and reflecting upon it. And he's, for ease of us talking neuroscience, he talks about that being in the temporal cortex. So it's in one part of the brain. Coming in, still in the past and passive. So for me, people can get quite a lot of ahas if I'm coaching or supervising. They can maybe get quite a lot of ahas there, but it's still quite passive and in the past. So the key is to nudge them, invite them, set up, create the conditions for them to cross the line, hence the title of my talk. So what happens when they cross the line and start doing this, extracting principles and then deciding to do something different? And it's all those things there. And Zoll talks about that as the person now becomes a producer. So there's already much more action there. And it's going from the inside of that person to the outside. This is where the new ideas are generated, new ideas, new actions. And it's much more active and future instead of the first part of it being rather past and passive. And this happens in the prefrontal cortex. So this was the curiosity with Zoll. When people are learning and going through the learning cycle, different parts of their brain are lighting up at different times. And in collaboration with Kolb, this is what he reckoned was going on. And if we think of transformational change as a series of learning cycles, so the classic learning cycle has just been turned into a spiral. These are two of my TA colleagues, Rosemary Napper and Trudy Newton. And they talk about the learning spiral. So we start with an event, something happens, we look at it, what was that about, we think about it, extract meaning, and then we change, and that becomes the next do, and on we go. And if you think of a little person learning, they're really doing experiments all the time. I've got a little niece, and to see, she tries something and she puts something there and it falls off. So she goes and has a look, and she picks it up and she goes back. So she's doing learning cycles all the time. And I think that's what has drawn me to doing the work that I'm doing. The classical TA that Eric Burns spoke about was quite deterministic. We write our script and there it is, and well, that's it for life. Whereas the more co-creative thinkers and the growing edge of TA is saying, because it is only a perception, we really can just continue to do the learning cycle over and over again, and we can change. But the change is it where do I want to go back to? Is it going to stay just there, which is interesting, but is it going to actually move there, which makes it really transformational? So, in the last 4 minutes and 40 seconds, buzz for somebody next to you. What sense are you making of the work that the client you have in mind? So you will notice that we're doing a little mini learning cycle here. You're taking some of your lived experience and you're going to talk about it and make some sense about it. And what might you be doing differently to enable your clients to cross the line? So it's just not, wasn't that fascinating talking about it? It's a classic supervision dilemma. Do coaches just talk about their work? Or do they actually make new meaning of who they are in their work? And for me, that's what crossing the transformation line brings. Thank you very much.